Clear, oh yeah, who's in the place to be? O.G.C representing for the BCC. For y'all,
Stepping
oh
in hot
yeah.
this year.
Originoo Gunn Clappaz, aka O.G.C, featuring Starang, Wondah, Louieville, Sluggah, and Top Dog, Brooklyn, New York, active since 1994. They came from Boot Camp Clik, one of the most respected movements in 90s hip-hop, and they came in loud. Originoo Gunn Clappaz, Star Wondah, Louieville, Sluggah, and Top Dog were never meant to be industry plans, commercial darlings, or radio stars. They were soldiers, ground-level MCs who earned stripes under the Duck Down Records banner, stepping into a lineup that had already shaken the East Coast underground with three hard-hitting acts, Black Moon, Smif-N-Wessun, and Helter Skelter. By the time O.G.C was ready to drop, the boot camp machine was in full swing. The sound, raw, militant, sample-heavy, was already trusted. The fans were loyal, and their 1996 debut album, The Storm, was expected to keep the flame burning. Instead, it flickered. The album had its moments. Star Wondah showed flashes of something bigger, a voice that cut through the murk and sounded like it belonged to someone with star potential. The Beat Miners laced the group with moody, heavy production, keeping things in line with the boot camp aesthetic. But the rest of the project fell short of expectation and didn't stick to the ribs like the records that came before it. In a movement built on voice, identity, and urgency, O.G.C offered a less focused version of what had already been heard. They didn't have a breakout anthem, the hooks didn't grab, and even though the talent was there, the trio failed to carve out a lane that separated them from their peers. 3 years passed before their second album arrived, and by then, hip-hop had shifted. Duck Down was losing steam, and O.G.C's window had nearly closed. The M-Pire Strikes Back came and went without impact, barely promoted and barely heard. There was no reinvention, no compelling evolution of sound or story. There was no third act, no underground return, and no widely praised solo run. The group faded into the shadows of a movement they helped hold up, but never truly led. They didn't collapse from scandal, they didn't fail in dramatic fashion, they just became a name you remember if you were there, and forgot if you weren't. Sometimes the most overlooked stories in hip-hop aren't the loudest failures. They're the quiet ones, the ones that had every tool in reach, but no blueprint to build something lasting. What happened? Let's talk about it. It's your boy JC, Stunted Growth Music. Let's get it. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Originoo Gunn Clappaz was a rap group from Brooklyn, New York that emerged in the mid-90s as part of the powerful Boot Camp Clik collective under Duck Down Records. Introduced through standout guest appearances on Helter Skelter's Nocturnal and Smif-N-Wessun's The Shinin', O.G.C quickly built buzz as the next act to watch from the camp. Their official debut, The Storm, dropped in 1996 and featured dark, rugged production from the Beat Miners along with standout verses from Starang, who many believed had star potential. Despite decent reviews and a strong underground presence, The Storm didn't perform commercially like earlier boot camp releases. They followed it up in 1999 with The M-Pire Strikes Back, but by then the buzz had faded, with limited promotion, declining label momentum, and a changing sound in New York's hip-hop. O.G.C's window closed quickly. The group never officially disbanded, but would never again release a full studio project together. Stunt number 1, surrounded by legacy but lacking a lane. Originoo Gunn Clappaz came into the game with momentum behind them. They weren't a random trio hoping to find their place, they were hand-picked members of a dominant collective. The Boot Camp Clik name carried weight in the underground. Their association with Smif-N-Wessun and Helter Skelter gave them instant credibility. The formula had worked before. The sound was defined and the fan base was loyal. All O.G.C had to do was deliver. What they did deliver was The Storm, a decent debut that did little to advance the movement or separate the group from those who came before them. Star Wondah emerged as a bright spot, a gritty MC with a sharp voice and natural charisma. But Louieville, Sluggah, and Top Dog rarely elevated the energy. As a trio, O.G.C lacked contrast. Their voices didn't play off one another, and there was no standout perspective or dominant lyrical identity. In a crew where each group had carved out its own space, O.G.C felt undefined and underdeveloped from the beginning. The production was familiar, dusty loops, bass-heavy drums, moody samples, but that worked against them. It felt like a return to a formula already perfected by Black Moon and Smif-N-Wessun. Nothing felt urgent or creatively driven. Their flows were competent, but the verses rarely lingered. The choruses were flat. The album, while respectable, didn't leave behind a single track that forced hip-hop heads to pay attention or even care to revisit. What the Storm lacked most was a moment, one image that froze time and gave the group something to stand on. Without that, O.G.C became the first act in Bootcamp Clik's lineup that didn't create conversation. At some point, you have to give people a reason to remember, and they didn't. Stunt number 2, a sophomore album that no one noticed. By the time O.G.C returned in 1999 with their second album, The M-Pire Strikes Back, the hip-hop world had already shifted. Shiny suits were in, Rockefeller was rising, and even underground New York rap was evolving. Meanwhile, Duck Down Records was losing steam, and O.G.C, once hyped as the next torchbearers of Bootcamp Clik, was no longer a priority in the changing ecosystem of rap. The M-Pire Strikes Back came with little fanfare, minimal promotion, and also no mainstream buzz. Unlike The Storm, which at least rode the wave of the bootcamp energy, the follow-up felt like it was dropped into a void. Star Wondah was still solid lyrically, but the production didn't match the quality or hunger of their debut. There were few Beat Miners contributions, and much of the album lacked the rawness and darkness that gave their first project its cult appeal. More importantly, the group didn't evolve. There was no new angle, no standout single, no reinvention of their identity. They didn't lean into Star's rising profile, didn't separate the members into unique voices, and didn't modernize their approach. The same formula that was already struggling in 1996 sounded flat out outdated by 1999. The commercial failure of The M-Pire Strikes Back wasn't just about poor timing, it was about failing to adapt. While other groups were experimenting, collaborating, and shifting sounds to survive, O.G.C doubled down on a formula that had already lost its edge. And without label support or strong visuals to push it forward, the album disappeared almost instantly. That disappearance marked the beginning of their fade out. There was no third album, no solo run, no redemption arc, just silence. And the saddest part, most people didn't even realize their second album existed. They came back, but no one was listening. Stunt number 3, no comeback, no closure. For most groups, a lukewarm debut and underwhelming follow-up can be salvaged by reinvention. Hip-hop history is full of second acts, artists who pivoted, evolved, and reclaimed relevance. But Originoo Gunn Clappaz never made that move. After their sophomore album faded quietly in 1999, they vanished without a clear exit and no effort to redefine themselves. There was no solo breakouts, no rebrands, no headline-grabbing features or mixtape runs. Just Louieville Sluggah dropping a handful of solo tracks that went largely unnoticed. Top Dawg stepped away almost entirely. Even Star Wondah, the member with the most visible talent, never mounted a solo push or capitalized on his early momentum. In the absence of music, interviews, or any compelling narrative, the group slipped into obscurity, not because fans turned on them, but because there was simply nothing left to follow. Their disappearance was made louder by the fact that their pairs didn't vanish. Smif-N-Wessun continued to evolve. Sean Price, formerly half of Helter Skelter, launched a solid solo run that helped to resurrect Duck Down's profile in the 2000s. Even Black Moon found ways to stay relevant with scattered releases and legacy credit, but O.G.C remained silent. When the Bootcamp Clik occasionally regrouped, the trio's presence was inconsistent or entirely absent. Without continued output or cultural presence, their legacy stalled. No documentaries, no podcasts, no myth, just a name fading into a long list of remember them conversations. In the end, Originoo Gunn Clappaz didn't crash or get cut off, they simply disappeared. And in an era where image, content, and reinvention kept others alive, O.G.C's silence felt like the final nail in a career that never quite figured out what it wanted to become. All in all, Originoo Gunn Clappaz had everything an underground group needed to make noise: solid beats, powerful affiliations, and moments of potential that hinted at something greater. But potential is only the start. What followed was a career that never fully formed, and a voice that never found its pitch. They weren't blackballed, they didn't flame out in controversy, they just stopped moving. And in a genre that demands reinvention, consistency, or at least mystery, they offered none. O.G.C never delivered a defining album, a cultural moment, or a strong enough identity to etch themselves into memory. They were present but rarely felt, connected but never leading. They were supposed to extend the bootcamp legacy, instead they became a footnote within it. This is the quietest kind of stunted growth, the kind where the silence says more than the music ever did. Salute, much respect, but for these reasons, their growth was stunted. It's your boy JC, Stunted Growth Music, and I'm out.